My mother-in-law announced she was moving into our new house. Then I learned my husband had secretly taken $18,000 from her and promised her our future nursery without ever asking me. My mother-in-law announced that she was moving into our new house while 30 people were holding champagne glasses in our kitchen. She tapped the counter, smiled at my parents, and said she had already chosen the upstairs bedroom with the morning light. My husband laughed nervously and told everyone it would be wonderful to have family close. Nobody had asked me. The house was partly funded with the inheritance my grandmother left me, and the room my mother-in-law claimed was supposed to become a nursery. 3 days later, a moving company called to confirm delivery of her furniture. Why had my husband given them our address? And what exactly had his mother given him that made both of them believe she had purchased the right to live in my home for the rest of her life? My name is Rachel. I was 31 when my husband Owen and I bought the first house either of us had owned. Owen was 33 and worked in commercial insurance. I was a speech-language pathologist at an elementary school. We had been married for 4 years and had spent most of that time in a 2-bedroom apartment where the upstairs neighbor practiced drums after midnight. The new house felt like a beginning. It was a red brick colonial with 3 bedrooms, a small office, and a backyard shaded by an old maple tree. The price was $412,000. My grandmother's estate provided $82,000 of the down payment. Owen and I added $28,000 from joint savings and financed the rest together. Before closing, we discussed every room. The smaller bedroom would be Owen's office because he worked from home twice a week. The sunny bedroom across the hall would remain a guest room for a year, then become a nursery if we were fortunate enough to have a child. Owen's mother, Diane, was 61 and owned a 2-bedroom condo 20 minutes away. Her mortgage was nearly paid off. She had retired early from a telecommunications company and described her finances as comfortable but not extravagant. Diane was energetic, social, and accustomed to directing other adults. She booked family vacations before checking dates and then called anyone who could not attend difficult. She rearranged our apartment kitchen whenever she visited because she believed frequently used objects belonged where she could reach them. Owen usually responded by making a joke. If Diane changed dinner plans, he said spontaneity kept people young. If she criticized our furniture, he said she had high standards. His humor made conflict disappear from the room without solving it. I did not dislike Diane. In small doses, she could be generous and entertaining. She brought soup when I had the flu and remembered every child's birthday in our extended family. The problem was that her kindness often arrived attached to authority. When we began house hunting, Diane sent listings daily. She favored houses with a first-floor bedroom or enough space for an addition. I told her we were looking for 3 bedrooms and a home office. Diane replied that smart couples planned for aging parents. I assumed she meant someday, not moving day. At one open house, Diane stood in a downstairs den and said it could easily hold a daybed for her. Owen told her, "Mom, you already have a condo." Diane answered, "Things change. Families prepare." I asked Owen about the comment afterward. He said Diane had been anxious since a friend entered assisted living. He promised his mother was not planning to live with us. That promise influenced my willingness to buy a house without a first-floor bedroom. I would never have chosen a long-term arrangement requiring a 61-year-old woman to climb stairs while also surrendering the room we planned for a child. The purchase became difficult 2 weeks before closing. The appraisal came in $18,000 below the agreed price. The sellers would reduce the price by $7,000, but not the full gap. Our lender said we needed another $11,000 in cash or a different property. Owen told me he could cover it from an old investment account. I knew he had inherited a small brokerage account from his grandfather, but I did not ask for a statement. The funds arrived, the lender accepted them, and we closed on schedule. I thanked Owen for using his separate inheritance. He said, "It is our house. There is no mine and yours." That sentence sounded loving at the time. We scheduled a housewarming 6 weeks after moving. My parents drove 3 hours. Co-workers brought plants and wine. Diane arrived early with a large framed photograph of Owen as a child and hung it in the upstairs hallway without asking. During a toast, my father said the house was a beautiful start for our future. Diane raised her glass and replied, "It is a new start for all of us. I sold my condo on Tuesday, and I will be moving into the sunny room next month." Several guests laughed because they thought she was joking. Diane continued. She said living alone no longer made sense. The house had plenty of space, and she would help when grandchildren arrived. Then she told my mother she had already ordered a smaller bed so the room would still feel airy. I looked at Owen. He did not look surprised. I asked Diane, "Are you saying your condo is already sold?" Diane said the closing was in 3 weeks. She added that Owen had known for months and had helped her choose a moving company. The room became silent. Owen touched my arm and said we should discuss details privately after the party. I told him there were no details because Diane was not moving in. Diane smiled as if correcting a child. She said, "Rachel, I contributed to this house. I am not asking to be a guest." That was the first time anyone mentioned a contribution. My mother quietly began gathering coats. The party ended within 20 minutes. After the last guest left, Owen admitted the $11,000 closing gap had not come from his investment account. Diane had transferred $18,000 to him. $11,000 covered the appraisal gap, and Owen used the remaining $7,000 for movers, paint, and closing expenses. He said Diane had offered the money after deciding to sell her condo. In exchange, he had told her she would always have a place with us. I asked whether he had promised a visit, temporary housing, or permanent residence. Owen said they had not used legal language. Diane understood that the sunny bedroom would be hers indefinitely. I asked why he lied about the source. Owen replied that he knew I would overreact before experiencing how helpful Diane could be. I told him arranging a permanent resident in our home was not a surprise I needed to experience before evaluating. Diane interrupted from the kitchen. She had not left. She said the 3 of us should stop using hostile words like permanent. Family stayed as long as family needed. I asked Diane where the proceeds from her condo sale were going. She said those funds were for retirement security and none of my business. Her condo had been listed for $286,000. Public records showed she owed less than $40,000. Diane expected to retain more than $200,000 while using $18,000 to claim a room, utilities, meals, and household authority in our home. Owen said focusing on the sale profit made me sound transactional. I replied that Diane had introduced the transaction by claiming she had contributed to the house. That night, I slept in the future nursery with the door locked. The next morning, I retrieved our closing file. Mortgage documents contain more details than most people remember signing. Our lender had required proof that the $18,000 transfer was not a secret loan. Inside the file was a signed gift letter from Diane. It stated that the funds were an unconditional gift to Owen and Rachel Bennett, that no repayment was expected, and that Diane would receive no ownership interest in the property. My signature was not on the letter because I had never known it existed. Diane and Owen had signed it. The lender had relied on their declaration. I made copies. When Owen woke, I placed the gift letter beside his coffee. I asked why Diane claimed a housing right when she had signed a statement saying she would receive no interest. Owen said a place to live was not technically ownership. He argued that the gift letter was bank language and their family agreement was separate. I asked to see the family agreement. There was no signed contract. There were text messages. Owen had written, "If you help us close, you will never have to worry about where you live. We will make the sunny room yours." Diane had replied, "Good, I do not want Rachel changing her mind later." Owen then wrote, "She will understand after we are settled." The deception had not developed gradually. They had anticipated my refusal and planned to confront me after my inheritance was committed and the house was purchased. I sent the closing file and messages to a real estate attorney named Marisol Vega. She told me the deed listed only Owen and me as owners. Diane's gift letter strongly contradicted any claim of equity. The text messages could support an argument that Owen made a personal promise, but he could not unilaterally grant lifetime possession of jointly owned marital property. Marisol also warned me not to let Diane establish residency while the dispute was unresolved. Once someone moved belongings, received mail, and lived in the home, removal could become slower and more complicated depending on local law. The warning mattered because Diane had already begun forwarding mail. On Monday, I found 2 envelopes addressed to her in our mailbox, an insurance statement and a catalog. I marked them "Return to sender, not at this address." I photographed both. That afternoon, a furniture company called to confirm delivery of a bed, dresser, and reclining chair. I declined delivery and stated that Diane did not reside at the property. Diane called Owen crying. Owen told me canceling her furniture was humiliating. I said, "Humiliation is announcing a takeover of someone else's home at her housewarming. A refused delivery is logistics." Owen moved to a hotel for 4 nights because he said the house felt hostile. Diane stayed in her condo until closing. She continued packing because she believed Owen would make me surrender. My parents offered to repay the $18,000 immediately. I refused. The money had been documented as a gift, and using my parents' savings to repair Owen's secret promise would simply transfer the cost to another family. Instead, I opened a separate account for my salary, preserved enough joint funds for the mortgage, and requested a formal accounting of the home purchase. I did not change the locks because Owen remained an owner. I installed a doorbell camera and told him in writing that Diane did not have permission to move in or store property. Owen accused me of treating him like an opponent. I told him he had negotiated against me before closing. I was only refusing to remain the uninformed party. Diane escalated through relatives. She told Owen's aunt that she had invested her life savings in our house. She told his cousin she had transferred $60,000. She told Paige, Owen's older sister, that I planned to sell the house and keep Diane's share. Paige called me to ask what had happened. I sent her the gift letter and the transfer record showing $18,000. Paige became quiet, then said Diane had tried a similar arrangement with her 5 years earlier. Diane had offered Paige $25,000 toward a larger home if Paige would build an in-law suite. Paige declined because she knew the money would become permanent authority over the property. Diane had complained ever since that Paige chose her husband over family. Paige also revealed that Diane had not sold the condo because she feared living alone. Diane's homeowners association had approved a special assessment of $31,000 per unit for roof and structural repairs. Owners could pay the assessment or sell before it was due. Diane sold quickly to avoid the charge and planned to keep most of her equity invested. The timing made sense. Diane had converted a coming housing expense into our obligation while preserving her sale proceeds. I asked Owen whether he knew about the assessment. He admitted he did. Diane had told him paying $31,000 for an aging condo was wasteful when our house had an empty room. I said the room was not empty. It was part of our plan for a child. Owen answered, "A baby does not need a separate room immediately." That sentence changed the dispute. Until then, he had described Diane's move as additional support. Now he admitted that his mother's preference had already displaced our shared future. I asked Owen to remain at the hotel until we met with a marriage counselor and signed an interim agreement. He refused at first, then returned home but slept in his office. We communicated mainly in writing because spoken conversations ended with him minimizing what he had promised. The condo closing approached. Diane had not arranged alternative housing. She believed urgency would become permission. 7 days before closing, Diane sent a certified letter stating that the $18,000 was consideration for lifetime occupancy. Her letter demanded access to the house on the 1st of the month and threatened legal action if we prevented her move. Marisol responded for me. She attached the gift letter, deed, and lender records. She stated that I had never consented to an occupancy agreement and that Diane must not enter or deliver property without permission. Owen was furious that I involved an attorney. I reminded him Diane had sent a legal demand first. Then another document appeared. Diane produced a one-page paper titled Family Housing Understanding. It stated that she would contribute toward our purchase in exchange for the sunny bedroom and shared household access. Owen had signed it 2 weeks before closing. The document did not include my name or signature. It did, however, show that Owen's deception was more formal than he had admitted. Marisol explained that Owen might face a personal dispute with Diane, but the papers still could not create her ownership or bind my interest in the property. It also conflicted with the later gift letter Owen and Diane signed for the lender. I asked Owen which statement was true. Had the money been an unconditional gift, as he told the bank, or payment for lifetime housing, as he told Diane? He said both documents represented different aspects of the same family decision. I told him they represented incompatible facts. Our counselor, Dr. Morales, asked Owen why he believed deception was safer than disagreement. Owen said he had spent his childhood preventing Diane from feeling abandoned. His father had left when Owen was 12, and Diane often told him he was the man who stayed. Dr. Morales asked whether being the man who stayed required making his wife the woman who was never consulted. Owen did not answer. We offered Diane a practical alternative. She could rent a nearby apartment for 6 months while choosing a smaller condo. Owen offered to pay $750 a month from his personal bonus during that period because he had created the expectation. Diane had more than enough proceeds to cover the rest. Diane rejected the offer. She said renting would waste money and prove that I had won. Her response showed the issue was not shelter, it was control and public defeat. 2 days before her closing, Diane arrived at our house with a locksmith. She told him she had lost her key to her son's home. The doorbell camera recorded the conversation. I spoke through the camera and stated that Diane was not a resident and did not have permission to enter. The locksmith left immediately. Diane then called the police and requested help retrieving property she claimed was inside. An officer arrived, reviewed her identification, and asked what belongings were in the house. Diane named the framed childhood photograph she had hung during the party. I handed the photograph to the officer from the front door. No one entered. The incident embarrassed Owen more than the original announcement. For the first time, he saw how far Diane would go when humor and delay no longer produced compliance. He told Diane, "Mom, you cannot create residency by sending mail or bringing a locksmith." Rachel said no, and I should have asked before promising anything. Diane replied that Owen had become weak. He told her weakness had been promising 2 people incompatible things because he feared one of them would be angry. Diane closed on her condo and checked into an extended stay hotel. 4 days later, she signed a lease on a furnished apartment. She told relatives she was homeless. Page corrected that story by saying Diane had received approximately $228,000 at closing and had declined a reasonable transition plan. The threatened lawsuit never arrived. Diane's attorney likely saw the same contradictory documents ours did. Her certified demand was followed by a short letter stating that she reserved all rights. Nothing else happened. The extended family did not become quiet as quickly. Diane organized a brunch at Page's house and told relatives she wanted one final chance to explain. Page agreed only if I could attend and bring records. Owen came with me. Diane presented photographs of herself helping us paint and a receipt for a refrigerator she had purchased as a housewarming gift. She said those acts showed the home had always been a shared family project. Then she described the $18,000 as her entrance contribution. I placed the lender's gift letter on the table and read the sentence stating that Diane would receive no ownership interest. Owen then showed the private housing paper he had signed and told the family he had no authority to make that promise without me. He did not ask anyone to blame Diane alone. Owen's uncle asked Diane why she had signed the gift letter if she believed she was purchasing lifetime housing. Diane replied that the bank would not have approved the mortgage otherwise. That answer ended most of the debate. She had not misunderstood the paperwork. She had knowingly described the money one way to the lender and another way to me. Paige also showed the special assessment notice from the old condo. Diane accused her of exposing private information, but the relatives finally understood that the move had been planned around an avoidable cost. Several apologized to me for repeating the claim that Diane had invested her life savings. The brunch did not produce an apology from Diane. It produced something more useful. The family could no longer pretend there were two equally plausible versions. The conflict with Owen was harder. I told him I would not continue the marriage without a postnuptial agreement protecting my inheritance contribution and preventing either spouse from granting occupancy or taking secured debt without written consent. I also required him to reimburse the $7,000 of Diane's transfer he had spent beyond the appraisal gap from his separate investment account. Owen initially said the requirement sounded like punishment. Dr. Morales asked what repair would look like if it did not include restoring money, authority, and truthful records. Owen stopped calling it punishment. He repaid the $7,000, signed the agreement after separate legal advice, and sent Diane a letter stating that the $18,000 had been a gift under the lender documents. He acknowledged that his separate promise had been unauthorized, and that he would personally handle any dispute arising from it. We also created a rule. Neither of us could offer overnight housing longer than 14 days without the other's written agreement. That rule applied equally to my family. For several months, I did not know whether we would remain married. I slept badly and felt angry whenever I passed the sunny room. The room had become evidence of how carefully Owen and Diane had planned around my future refusal. Trust began returning through small, boring acts. Owen showed me financial messages before responding. He stopped using jokes when Diane crossed a boundary. He corrected relatives who repeated false versions, instead of asking me to absorb them for peace. Diane purchased a one-bedroom condo 9 months later for $176,000 in cash. It had an elevator, a guest room in the building, and lower monthly costs than her old place. It was objectively safer and more suitable for aging than our upstairs bedroom. She invited us to the housewarming. I did not attend. Owen went for 1 hour and did not bring a gift larger than we had agreed upon. A year after our housewarming, I became pregnant. The sunny room became a nursery. Owen painted it pale green and assembled the crib himself. Before he hung anything on the wall, he asked me where I wanted it. That question should have been ordinary. After everything, it felt like evidence. Diane met our son when he was 6 weeks old. The visit lasted 90 minutes. She did not stay overnight. When she joked that the nursery would have made a lovely room for her, Owen said, "Mom, that decision was never yours to make." Diane changed the subject. Our relationship with her remains limited. We meet in public or at her condo. She has no key to our house. Mail addressed to her is still returned. I do not apologize for those boundaries. Some relatives believe I should have let Diane move in temporarily because she was between homes. They ignore that she created the gap deliberately, rejected rental options, and tried to establish residence before I agreed. Temporary help requires honesty. A planned ambush is not temporary help. The $18,000 never bought Diane a room. It did buy clarity. It exposed that Owen had confused keeping his mother calm with being a good son, even when the price was deceiving his wife and compromising jointly owned property. Owen later calculated what Diane's proposed arrangement would have cost over 10 years. Even without rent, her share of utilities, food, insurance changes, and renovations would have exceeded the original contribution. I did not need that calculation to justify saying no, but it helped him understand that a one-time transfer had been used to demand an open-ended subsidy plus control over space. We repaid no part of the gift. Instead, Owen kept the 6-month rental offer open until Diane purchased her new condo. She never used it. Her refusal became permanent proof that she had not been abandoned without options. I kept the gift letter, the secret housing paper, and the doorbell recording in one file. Together, they tell the entire story: the statement made to the bank, the promise made behind my back, and the moment Diane tried to turn urgency into access. If your mother-in-law sold her home and announced she was moving into yours because your spouse had secretly accepted money and promised her a room, would you allow a temporary stay to preserve the marriage? Or would you refuse entry until every legal and financial boundary was repaired?